Hello and welcome to That Is Nice podcast. So, what do we got for you today? So today we have some interesting things in history that you don't know about, because people talk about how there's like suppression of like the media, there's suppression of like conservative voices, and you got to remember there's also suppression of history. There's history that you're not taught. There's things that they don't want you to know. And this isn't like some Alex Jones, like this isn't like, oh, the dirt of the frog's gay. This is real stuff that happened. So here's a list of 10. You know what? Fuck it. We're not going to do 10. Here's a list of presidents that are some of the worst presidents because they've done some of the worst things. And I'm going to leave out... I'm going to try to keep it to old presidents to avoid any sort of political bias here. Because nobody cares if you're ragging on some president from the 1800s. But by God, if I ragged on like Obama or something, that could be bad. So let's start out with a good one. Mr. Harrison. Benjamin Harrison. You probably don't know anything about Benjamin Harrison, but now you can say you know something about Benjamin Harrison, and that's that he was a president. So why do I think he's one of the worst? Well, one of the major ones is something called the Wounded Knee Massacre. Were you taught that? I don't know. If you were, congratulations, you win. So the Wounded Knee Massacre was a massacre that happened on December 29th, 1890, under his presidency. It was a killing of 150 to 300 Native Americans by U.S. soldiers, and it was in the area. It wasn't like they went and they like bashed in 200 kneecaps. The name is just a coincidence because it is by Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. It's in southwestern South Dakota. So what happened? In 1890, the Plains Indians had lost their struggle to defend their territory and way of life against expansionists. Half of them were starving, half of them were desperate, but all of them were something. They embraced something called the Ghost Dance, the Plains Indians. The Ghost Dance was to stop white man. It was for, they wanted to restore their old way of living. And it was believed that it would give them a special shirt when they did this dance called ghost shirts. You can't see them, but they're there. They're ghost shirts. And these ghost shirts would stop the white man's bullets. This is their belief. So, nervous U.S. authorities seeing the ghost dance, they see that and they don't know what's going on. They just see people dancing and they don't know that this is probably the most hated dance by Congress, folks. They see the dance and they go, oh, what is it, a war dance? Is it a cover-up for an Indian uprising? What is this dance? So U.S. authorities decided to crack down on the movement. And on December 15th of 1890, an attempt was made to arrest a famous Lakota. What was this Lakota's name? Chief Sitting Bull. Now, I got something to say about the names. Were these really their names? Because if you call the Native American something like that today, that'd be an insult, I feel like. I don't know. Chief Sitting Bull. Anyway, so during this arrest of Chief Sitting Bull, a Lakota Indian, a fight broke out. And in this fight, the chief was killed. Seeking safety, a band of Lakotas led by, again, the name Chief Spotted Elk. He was known to U.S. soldiers as Bigfoot. They were heading for Pine Ridge Reservation to seek safety. from our cavalry. So the cavalry regime, they arrived under Colonel James Forsyth. They encircled the Indian camp, placing 4 rapid-fire Hotchkiss guns at points around the perimeter. So, the following morning after placing the Hotchkiss guns, they ordered the Lakotas to disarm. They show up, they say, disarm. No guns, no bows, no arrows, nothing for you. According to many accounts, a medicine man called, again with the name, Yellowbird, began to do the ghost dance. And other Lakotas began to do the ghost dance songs as Yellowbird was ghost dancing. And as Yellowbird was ghost dancing, they began throwing dirt in the air. This agitated the soldiers, creating a tense situation. Now just imagine this. So these soldiers come up to these Indians at a camp, and they say, give us your guns. The Lakotas don't know what they're saying, I guess. So the medicine man just starts flaring his arms around and starts dancing. Other people start throwing dirt in the air and singing songs. And then you got a soldier going, hey, cut that out. Hey, stop that, you're getting dirt in my eyes. Stop, I said stop that. And from there it escalated. A scuffle then broke out when a soldier tried to disarm a young Lakota named Black Coyote. The Indian refused to surrender his rifle. Some say because he was deaf and did not understand the order to disarm. And amid the scuffle that followed, his rifle discharged. This deaf Indian who has a rifle, his gun discharged. This was all during the scuffle. And pandemonium ensued, and both Lakota and the U.S. soldiers began shooting at close range, bang, bang, bang. They had a firefight. Panicking soldiers that didn't know what was going on, they're just out in the corners by the Hotchkiss guns waiting around. They fire the Hotchkiss guns into the encampment. And then the fighting ended about an hour after. They were fighting for an hour because the deaf man with a rifle and the U.S. people ultimately thinking this dance was something crazy. Almost half the Lakota were dead, and then even including 60 women and children. The next day, another firefight broke out between the Lakota ghost dancers and the 7th Cavalry. So all in all, how many losses? There's between 150 and 300 Lakota died, and then about altogether 500 wounded. That's what we would say, sheesh, to. Who's the next president on the list? Who's the next one that didn't do too great? Who's the next one? Oh, shit, you know what? This one actually, maybe people think he's great. I think he's great. But he wasn't. And that next president is W.W. Woodrow Wilson. What did he do? He improved something called interventionism. And that's where we intervene into other countries. This is when we wanted to start, touching other countries and making them more like America. George Washington never wanted us to do this. Another amazing fact is he got reelected in 1916 because he kept us out of World War I. And then after he got elected in 1916, he got us involved in World War I. So those are a few good reasons, but here's one more. The Espionage Act. Woodrow Wilson was all about the Espionage Act. What did the Espionage Act do? The Espionage Act prohibited many forms of speech, including any disloyal, profane, scrupulous, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States. So the Espionage Act essentially was censorship of speech. It was essentially a bigger attack on free speech, our First Amendment. It was the first bigger than YouTube because this was a government law that was passed. Who's another one? Well, there's a mall named after him in Blaisdell, New York. His name is McKinley. He got us into the Spanish-American War, which extended into another war called that people don't know about because they don't want you to know about it because it's bad. The Philippine-American War. Where we put, I don't know if this is the proper terminology, I don't know if this is bad to say or not, but this is the only way I know how to pronounce the people of Filipinos. We put Filipinos in concentration camps. We justified this. Not we, but McKinley justified this by saying Filipinos were not capable of self-governing. It's equivalent to going over to someone's house that's perfectly fine and like holding a gun to the family's head, trying to get them to wash their dishes because you don't think that they do a good job at washing their own dishes. How does it affect you if they don't wash the dishes well or not? You're not eating off those dishes. So ultimately, it's a pretty bad excuse. All right. Got another one for you. Herbert Hoover. Whoop. HH. What did he do? So he was president around the beginning of the Great Depression when it was all about to start to unfold. Herbert Hoover raised import taxes and income taxes. Why? To balance out the budget during the Great Depression, because the budget was a little bit off. Because everybody's so poor, so all of our money's going away. So let's raise import taxes and let's raise income taxes. So let's make things more expensive and give less money to spend on things when people can't afford things. Was his strategy. He was also responsible for the rise of crony capitalism. What Herbert Hoover faced during his time in office was a recession, which with his lousy policy, he turned it into a Great Depression. Another one. Sorry, DJ Khaled just popped in here. Warren Harding. This one's short and sweet. He said this, and this is why I'm putting him on here. This is a quote from him. I was not fit for office, and I should not be here. That's what he said, so I'm just going to take him for his word. Also, another thing, if I didn't want to take him for his word, if you don't want to trust this man, if you don't want to trust Warren Harding's word, which is fine if you don't, but be careful because that Espionage Act. So Warren Harding, he would also have gambling parties and smuggle alcohol into the White House, which is bad, yeah. But it was real bad because he did it at the height of Prohibition. Come on, Warren. All right, we got one more for you. And the next one is a man that, love him, you hate him, it doesn't matter. President during World War II. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR. President FDR. Why? I don't know. Maybe because of Japanese internment camps, if that's a good enough reason. So, after Pearl Harbor, FDR imprisoned between 100,000 and 120,000 Japanese. You gotta remember, this is in 1942, and it goes till 1946. How many Japanese people were even in America at that time? Like, what was the population at that time? What was the population in America at that time? Is that like is that like 70% of the Japanese people? Is that like 90% of the Japanese people that were living in America? Like, imagine if we did that today. How many, like, if we took the same percentage that he took and did that now? what would that be? Like 1 million or 2 Japanese people? I don't know. That's quite a bit. And then also around the same time, then you have like Adolf Hitler with his concentration camps, which makes me question, with all these concentration camps we were doing, with like the Philippine American War, and the Japanese internment camps. Both of these concentration camps happened prior to Hitler's concentration camps. So I'm curious if that inspired him in any way. I'm curious if he took inspiration to that, from that. But yeah, so I'm going to drop some history for the next couple of podcasts because I feel like there's not enough good history coming on this podcast. A lot of AI, but yeah, so there it is. 10 presidents from history that did things that are bad in history. Didn't really get a catchy title for that one. But hey, I hope it was nice. Thank you for tuning in. This is That Is Nice Podcast. And have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.